Okay, so I got like 10 pages of material here. It just goes. It's just more evidence to back what it is that I'm saying. Okay. So let's see. I talked about William Tyler was accused of the rape of Anna Campbell, and then her dad says, "Well, my little girl said you raped her, and that was all that was necessary. My little girl said you did it. So goodbye to William Tyler of Nicholasville, or of Nicholas County, Kentucky." And William Tyler got lynched because Anna Campbell said that he did it. So and then we have Jim Kelly. He got lynched also. Jim Stone had got lynched in Mayfield, and then that starts a race war. So it makes me think, why would a race war happen if he actually had lynched it? You know, like there's nobody liked in the black community, nobody liked that black folks were getting lynched, but sometimes, you know, if they had done something bad, then they were like more reluctant, you know, they weren't as like passionate. I mean, to murder an innocent person versus murdering a bad person. But when they killed Jim Stone, they put a list on his chest and saying more people are going to die because of white supremacy. So, and also another thing that should be taught, like white supremacists, you know, in the circles. Let's see, when I grew up, you know, there's like in Gallatin County and Boone County and Walton, where's Walton at? In Kenton County, there's you know, there's a lot of racists, a lot of people waving the Confederate flags and stuff. And I remember quoting MLK, "Used to judge a person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin," and you could hear a pin drop, right? And after that day, they turned their back on me, and it was like, well, us white folks have got to stick together, and I become known as a nigger lover. And that was that's important, because when the days of white supremacy, when lynching was going on, and when the Ku Klux Klan was in town right after the Civil War, they didn't just go after black folks, they also went after white so-called radicals who believed that black folks were people too. So if you're a white person in Reconstruction, in antebellum the South, or, you know, after Reconstruction, and you had thought that black folks were people too, then you would have been a target also for the lynching or the harassment that would happen. So, page 83 in this book here, George C. Wright. In the majority of cases, no one challenged the word of a white woman when she identified her attacker, but assuming that a rape or even an attempted rape had occurred, it would have been understandable for the woman to be so upset that she might have been unable to identify the rapist. Even worse, she might have identified the wrong person as the attacker. A few newspaper accounts, which were overwhelmingly unsympathetic toward blacks accused of crime, suggest that the woman's memory of the attack left something to be desired. On December 14th, 1892, Katie Anderson of Bowling Green, okay? So Katie Anderson she's a piece of shit, okay? She is fucking garbage, okay? So December 14th, 1892, Katie Anderson of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Bowling Green was the Confederate capital when Lincoln, you know, had the Civil War. The Confederates went to Bowling Green and tried to establish a makeshift government, which only lasted about 2 years. So Katie Anderson of Bowling Green in December 14, 1892, claimed that she had been raped by an unidentified black man. After an investigation lasting several days, the police arrested Bob Harper. Because of the efforts of police, Bob Harper was protected from the mob and came to trial 2 weeks after the alleged rape had taken place. The newspaper reported that Katie Anderson was very slow to make a statement implicating the Negro, and it was only by dint of the most persistent questioning that she finally said that, according to her best knowledge and belief, Bob Harper was the man who assaulted her. When summarizing the events of the first day of the examining trial, that this phase of the trial for the black man accused of rape lasted for more than 1 day was remarkable, the reporter concluded Miss Katie Anderson's identification is not positive enough to warrant the more conservative thinking people in taking the law into their own hands, and this is all that saved Bob Harper's life. It is now thought the trial will be permitted to come to a close. Public opinion is still divided as to the Negro's guilt, and only a thorough investigation will determine it one way or the other. So this is also like To Kill a Mockingbird, okay? The newspapers, it didn't come straight out of here. I think the Harper and Lee come out of Mississippi or Alabama, but this is almost identical to what had happened in To Kill a Mockingbird. The newspaper's statement that Anderson identified Harper under persistent questioning is totally misleading in the light of the exact words that were said at the examining trial. The official stenographer of Warren County Circuit Court, R.J. Jarboe, wrote down the young woman's testimony. Anderson was interviewed at great length by the prosecuting attorney, James C. Sims, and by William L. Donnelly, a prominent judge serving as one of Harper's attorneys. It was clearly established that the man had worn a mask and a bonnet when he first attacked Anderson, but he had willingly removed those items during the assault. This is important because Anderson had known Harper for years and had seen him recently. Some of the testimony as follows. Question to Katie Anderson. Have you ever seen the man who committed the assault upon you since he committed? I don't know. Please tell the court whether either of the prisoners you have examined this evening and sitting in this room, whether either one of them is the man that assaulted you and inflicted those wounds upon your person. Katie Anderson answers. Witness looks at her father and says, Papa, I don't know what to say. Papa, I don't know what to say. Question by Judge H.B. Hines. It is necessary in order that I could try the case that you make some answer. Witness does not answer. Miss Cora Anderson, Katie Anderson's sister. You have thought now enough to answer it. Judge H.B. Hines. Miss Katie Anderson, can't you answer that question for us? If you can't answer, say so. And if you can't answer, tell us. That is all we want to know. If you don't know, say so. And if you do, tell us. Witness does not answer. Question, Miss Katie Anderson, can you answer it? Katie, I don't know. To the best of my knowledge, the last one that stood up, Harper, looks more like him than anyone I have seen yet. Question, do you know Bob Harper? Yes, sir. Judge W.L. Delaney on cross-examination. Bob Harper was brought up to your house several times, was he not? Yes, sir. On that occasion, didn't you look at Bob Harper and say he was not the man? Yes, sir. Didn't you ask why they brought that man Harper there and said there was no use in bringing him? Yes, sir. So there's several things there. First of all, she had said that he did not rape her, right? So the first time when he was brought to her and says that, why did you even bring him up here? He did not rape me. He did not do it. And then when they're sitting there asking her, she's like, Papa, I don't know what to say. She's feeling guilty. She's feeling bad about putting an innocent man, if she says that he's guilty, he's going to die, and she knows that. So she's feeling bad about doing so. And so, instead of just saying a lie, flat out lie, yes, he did it, she was hoping that, the rest of the community would take over for her. The next morning, as the examining trial continued, a mob of 1,000 surrounded the courthouse while 50 armed men marched into the courtroom and took Harper. Although it was broad daylight, no one concealed his identity. In fact, the paper reported that the leaders were all well-known citizens. In his own defense, Bob Harper made a statement as he's being carried away. I have tried to do everything in the world to prove my innocence. I'm not guilty, and I die with this on my lips. I've never done anybody any harm. I am innocent. When informed of Bob Harper's death, Katie Anderson said quietly, it was a comfort to her to know he was beyond any question the guilty man. So then, once he's dead, yeah, of course he was guilty. A few days later, however, Katie Anderson stated emphatically to the public that Bob Harper had been the rapist. Only the fear that he would have been instantly hanged before my eyes kept me from saying so positively all the time, and I could not rid myself of this fear, and I was so nervous and frightened when I was before the court that at times I could not command my voice to talk. She had no sympathy for the murdered black man. It was a horrible death for any human being, but I would have never been without fear as long as he was alive. The local correspondent of the Courier-Journal applauded the manner in which the good citizens of Bowling Green had done an unpleasant but necessary chore. No such work has ever been done before in so orderly and quiet a manner. There was no loud talking, not a shot fired, and no unusual demonstration. The men who composed the crowd were a resolute and determined set and showed that they merely meant to protect the virtue of their homes and their families, and they proceeded about the work in a business-like manner. There could be no question as to Bob Harper's guilt, and though his punishment was not brought about according to the forms of law, all will admit that it was a righteous one. Several days after the lynching, Bob Harper's other attorney, Judge Will Hobson, began interviewing a wide range of people about whether or not his client had actually raped Katie Anderson. The testimony of many different whites, including law officers and blacks, placed Bob Harper elsewhere in the town when the alleged incident had occurred, so he had alibis. In contrast with the usual statements by whites and the lynched black was a bad Negro and a menace in the community. All the people interviewed said that Bob Harper was an ideal citizen. Several former employers remembered that the black youth is honest and considerate. One woman said he always returned the correct change after purchasing her groceries. So he's so honest, he would return the correct change. And if anything, he was extremely shy, especially around white people. So for him to be so bold and to, rape somebody, he was shy. More than 50 years after the lynching, attorney John B. Rogers, who had attended the examining trial, wrote that Bob Harper was innocent of the rape of Katie Anderson. He accurately recalled the name of the man who led the mob and the details of the lynching. The mob is a beast and should always be so described. I have seen instances of it in my lifetime. When I was studying law in Bowling Green over a half a century ago, an unforgivable crime was committed against a Miss Anderson who lived at the outskirts of Bowling Green at the foot of the Cedar, now on the Nashville Road. Great excitement prevailed. A Negro, Bob Harper, was arrested. An examining trial was begun at the courthouse, and Mr. James C. Sims, who subsequently became my law partner, was prosecuting, representing the Commonwealth. A mob marched in with guns and took the prisoner from the judge and carried him out to the old fairgrounds where Laurel Avenue now is, and there hung him. I saw it all. It made me sick. There are many members of the local militia company in the group with guns taken from the armory. It was led by a prominent man, Crit Alexander, who is a leader in the Christian church in Bowling Green. I saw them drag the poor fellow along at the fairgrounds. He was placed in a wagon and a noose put around his neck. I saw the man who tied the noose. The wagon was driven from beneath Bob Harper, who I saw dangling and tickling. Then I turned away with loathing. Nothing was ever done about it. No indictment was ever returned, although the mob was unmasked. Mr. Sims was outspoken in his criticism. Although he was the prosecuting attorney, he laid some blame on Dr. McCormick as encouraging the mob. Your cousin, Colonel Will Hobson, published a pamphlet to show that Bob Harper was innocent, but Harper was underground and the people lost interest. So Crit Alexander was the man who had led, this mob that had wanted to kill and save Katie Anderson's dignity. And I had mentioned something earlier about how, I don't, you're not allowed to hit a woman. I remember my mother, teaching me this when I'm like 5 years old. Meanwhile, she's getting smacked around. But the point about that, I remember Bill Burr having a joke about it where he was sitting there saying, well, if he could do whatever he wanted to do and not get punched for it, my God, he would just do the most outrageous, dickish things. He would just be a total fucking asshole. And then he had specific examples which were hilarious, right? But it does, when you're absolutely unaccountable for what you say and what you do. This is Katie Anderson. Katie Anderson, all she did, she didn't even say he was guilty. It almost seems like everybody else wants to push for her to be, to be guilty and say that he was guilty so they could do this heinous thing to this poor man. So they could do this, so they could lynch this poor man, and that's why they wanted to do it. They wanted her to, say that he's guilty so they could go ahead and perform mob justice. There's so many things that's wrong with murdering an innocent person. Not only, they're innocent, so, you want to talk about being Christians. Do you know of any famous Christian who was murdered, who was innocent, and murdered by a mob of people, like Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ was put on a cross by a bunch of Roman authorities. So, automatically, these fake Christians are creating a Jesus Christ out of Bob Harper. But in addition to that, the real person who had raped her gets away scot-free. So, he was an innocent person who didn't do anything, and yet the person that had raped the person, since you already killed a man before, you can't go back and say, well, no, it was actually him. It was actually a different person who did it, and we need to go kill him now. No, you already said, that it was this person. We've murdered this person, so in a way, you let the rapist, the real murderer, the real, shitty, wicked person who outraged a white woman go free, and you murdered a black man who did nothing to anybody. In fact, was very shy, give the correct change, had alibis. He was in a different part of town that day. So Dr. McCormick was encouraging the mob. This is Crit Alexander was the one who had pushed for Bob Harper to die. I'm not sure where all this had actually happened, which county. Bowling Green. So this all happened in the city of Bowling Green. Why, after it had been clearly established that Bob Harper was innocent of the attack on Katie Anderson, did the authorities and citizens fail to reopen the case? For one thing, it meant disputing the word of the white woman, right? Katie Anderson, she's a white woman, so what she said goes. For one thing, since she had publicly stated that Bob Harper had attacked her, you couldn't go back on that. Furthermore, it was obvious that Bowling Green officials were unwilling to admit their mistake in allowing the wrong person to be lynched even though it meant the real rapist, if Katie Anderson had even been assaulted. So there's even, doubt whether there's even an assault that had even happened. Avoided prosecution. Although it would have been a relatively easy matter to investigate and arrest the lynchers, the officials refused to do this as well. So for most part, doubt was not a factor when blacks were lynched for raping white women. Indeed, to suspect that black was contemplating an attack on a white woman would have been enough to justify his lynching.